right, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. We are going to go ahead and get started this morning with Bob Cole. He is joining us from Business Central Addins. They're a great company that has a number of different add-ins that are super functional, really great for our Business Central and NAV customers. And he's got a number here that he would like to go through, primarily AR and Collections Manager and Dimensions Manager. So really excited to have Bob here to kind of introduce our clients to some of his add-ons here. So I'm going to let Bob take it away. Bob.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. I have been working with Microsoft Dynamics NAV before it was Microsoft Dynamics NAV, back in the old days when it was Navision. I first started with it in March of 1994, just after they released their Windows version on v1.0. And I've gone through every single change, and just when I think I know something about this thing, they change it. Welcome to the world of Microsoft. So about 10 or 12, 13 years ago, I started working with this company, Dynamics NAV Addons, and I'm the managing director. And we've been developing out things that Microsoft ought to do but doesn't. They've picked up a little bit recently in some of the latest releases of Business Central, but they're still nowhere near what we're doing in any of our add-ons. So today, what I'd like to do is talk about a couple of them. We may in the future, if this is valuable, then we may do a few others in another session. So first of all, we have two websites, Business Central Add-ins and Dynamics NAV Addons. Essentially, they're pretty close to the same, except that the screenshots on Business Central Add-ins deal with Business Central, strangely enough, and NAV deals with NAV. But the functionality of all of the add-ons that we have is pretty much identical in both versions, whether it's NAV or whether it's Business Central, or whether it's Business Central 14 or Business Central 20, or in the App Store version, in the SaaS version. They all do the same thing. Sometimes the buttons are moved around just because Microsoft does that. But anyway, so let's take a look at, first of all, the company. We've been around for over more than 10 years. It's about 12 or 13 years now. And all we do is add-ons for Microsoft Dynamics NAV and for Business Central. We have over 1,000 installations all over the world. We have customers in every country from Australia to Zimbabwe and every place in between. We have Dimension Manager users in Lithuania, Poland, Great Britain, Germany, France, Canada, US, all over the world. It's one of our most popular add-ons, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. Most of the users for the collection system are in the US and Canada, mostly because it's gotten to be fairly sizable, and the functions are a little bit different in other countries. So we support people all over the world, and I'm constantly working with Sweden, Czech Republic, you name it, South Africa. So let's start off and talk about the AR and Collections Manager, which is one of our most popular add-ons. There is nothing like it in Business Central out of the box. It's a couple of the newer add-ons that we have are not newer add-ons, but the newer versions of Business Central are starting to pick up on some of the functionality that we have, but they're woefully short in what's necessary. But the Collections Manager, there is nothing in there other than an aging report. And I run into people all the time who say that they're using the aging report and they print it out, make their calls, mark them up, and then next week they print another copy. And so they never can find the notes, who they called. So our AR and Collections Manager is divided into three major parts. the exception list, exception manager, and the contact event screen. An exception is our terminology for any accounts receivable transaction that requires somebody's attention. It might be an overdue invoice, it might be a partially paid invoice, it might be something that an unapplied payment or credit memo, it might be something in dispute. It could be a lot of different things that generically we call exceptions because they don't follow the normal path of creation, application, and disappearance into history. So the three parts, the exception list, is essentially a to-do list. It's a list of all of the transactions that require attention. The exception manager is used to research what's going on with the account, and we'll see that. It shows you a lot of information about the account to be able to familiarize yourself with it before you make contact, and then the contact event screen records who you spoke with, what you did, or maybe you didn't speak with them, maybe you left a voicemail, what they promised, how much did they say they were going to send, when did they say they were going to send it, and there are reports that deal with that. We've also added a couple special functions in the system, and you're going to see something very interesting. You're going to see a bug in Dimension Manager, a known bug, which if you Google it, it'll show you that there is a bug, and you're going to see it. So we offer the ability to write off small remainder amounts. I don't understand how companies get away with it, but there's an awful lot of companies who don't pay their invoices to the penny. They leave a small remainder amount. Now, in Business Central, you have the option of automatically writing those off, but you have to set a limit. And if you set the limit at $5 or $10, then $10.01 won't get written off. So we give you the ability to write things off and to record reasons why you write them off, so that you can query the system how many times you've written stuff off and why, by customer or by reason code, which is a new function that we just added in the last month or so. We can mark invoices in dispute because maybe it's the day that somebody gets the job of dealing with upset customers and they need to get a list of all of the invoices that are being disputed so that they can resolve issues. We've also added some credit management functions, and we're going to be adding more to that in the near future. So we've added the ability to, when you enable credit management, that if the customer's open balance plus their unshipped orders exceed a credit limit, the customer is automatically put on credit hold, which is not the same as block. It's a function that we've added called credit hold. And what it does is it prevents open orders from being released so that they can't be shipped. Everything else remains the same. If you use the function blocked on the customer card, then you can't enter new sales orders and you can't post payments, which kind of defeats the whole purpose. So we added this function. Now, if a customer is placed on credit hold, you can specify specific users, usually supervisors, who have the ability to override the credit hold either for the entire customer or for specific invoices. So that the whole idea of credit hold is to encourage customers to pay their bills. But if there's a critical order that absolutely has to be shipped, a defined user has the option of overriding overriding the hold so that can be released and shipped. Now, this is one of the things that we're going to be adding on. I've had a couple customers who say rather than looking at the credit limit, what they would rather do is have the ability to look at the oldest open invoice. So if they have an invoice that is 60 days overdue, then the customer goes on credit hold. So we will be adding in the function to be able to use either the credit limit or the days or both, and to be able to specify how many days should pass that invoices are overdue before the customer gets put on credit hold. So that's planned probably with any luck by the end of July, we should have that in place. We do an automatic calculation of average days to pay and average days late, which is displayed on the exception manager, part of the information. We also have an overall AR dashboard. So there's a whole bunch of things that facilitate the collection process. So let's take a look at it. Hopefully this looks familiar to most of you. This is the SaaS version of Business Central, my demo version. And you can see on here that we've added in a function called AR and Collections Manager. We also have a couple other of our add-ons, 1099 Toolkit. We also have Merge Utility and Dimension Manager in this database, but I'll get to the Dimension Manager later. If you click on the drop down for AR and Collections, there's a whole bunch of functions. First and foremost is generate and update exceptions. The exception list, which is the to-do list, as I mentioned before, needs to be updated every day. So every time payments are made, they need to be reflected and updated in the exception list, and every day new things that yesterday were not included in the exception list but are now either newly overdue or newly partially paid or whatever that need to be included. So generate an update will add new things in and drop off things that have been handled. So this is where most collections people will be living. Now, we also have a list of collections representatives. All of this information is considered confidential, and the only people who can access anything except the collections list are the people that are listed in the collections representative list. So they have to be listed in here in order to not get a permissions error on anything else. They will get you do not have permission. If you click on anything else in here, they'll get a permissions error if they're not listed in here. But anybody can go into here, just that nobody knows that. We have a number of reports, and we'll talk about some of these reports. Most of them are pretty good at this point. There's a couple that I would dearly love to update. If somebody could give me a specification, we'll talk about that. So generate and update exceptions gets run automatically in the job queue function every night, sometime at 2 in the morning. And the reason it's done at night is because while it's running, it locks the customer ledger entry table, and customer service people kind of take a dim view of being locked out of posting orders. So this gets run every night automatically in the middle of the night. So the next morning when they get up, the exception list will be refreshed and updated. Now this is the demo Business Central data, and it's a little bit, it's not as robust as the old NAV data was. There was a lot of data in NAV, not so much in Business Central. But this is a list of all of the various different transactions, and some of them are new. That means that they were just included the last time generate and update exceptions was run. These are now follow-ups. These two are new. Some of them are overdue. There's an unapplied credit memo. We talk about extraordinary value invoice. Well, an extraordinary value invoice in debt collection setup is the ability to handle exceptionally large invoices differently than you handle regular invoices. Things get entered into this list based on the due date of the invoice and some number of days, which is defined in setup after the due date. Many companies like to give the people a grace period. Say the due date was on Monday, but they're going to give them 2 or 3 or 5 days. In fact, I have one customer who gives them 30 days grace before it gets into the collection system, which is this list. So part of the setup is to determine how soon after the due date of the invoice an entry will be made. Now, partially paid invoices are entered immediately at the point when a cash receipts posting is made for less than the full amount of the invoice. The next day, that will appear in this list. Disputes. If an invoice is marked in dispute, even if it was just created yesterday and it's not overdue, it's not even due yet, if it's marked in dispute, it will be instantly added to this list and it will be marked in dispute. So we'll talk about some of that stuff. There's a lot of information in this screen, including whether or not something was paid short. Now, when the cash receipts posting is done, and it's for less than the full amount, the person posting the cash receipts may know why it was posted short, why it was paid short. In this case, they said, well, they didn't pay the freight. So the original amount of the invoice was $809. The remaining amount is $976 because they didn't pay the freight. Well, somebody may decide, and this is a yay Microsoft, you've got to say edit list in order to be able to do anything. Okay, so at this point, they may decide they're going to write this off. So they put a check mark in here. Anything else that they want to write off, they put check marks in those, and then they will go to write off. And what that does is it creates an entry in a specific journal, in a specific batch, that is reviewed by a supervisor, and the supervisor then makes a final determination, will it be written off or not, and they will post it. So the entry is all set to zero the entry out. So we have an entry that says minus 976. If that gets posted in the journal, then the remaining balance will drop to zero, and this line will drop off the exception list. Okay. Now, one of the things that we also just added recently is a notification. So whoever it is that's charged with making the final decisions, a supervisor, the controller, whoever it is, will receive an email that says there are new entries that require your attention and your decision. Now, there's another one down here. So this is also marked as having been paid short. The original amount was $19,900 of the invoice, and they paid $2,000 on it. Well, obviously, you're not going to write off $17,900, but it's very interesting. Why did they only pay $2,000? That would be a reason to say, I want to get in touch with the School of Fine Art to find out why they only paid $2,000. What's the problem with the invoice? So the fact that it was paid short may be for write-offs, or it may be a flag that there's something wrong and there's a problem with the invoice. So that can be used either way. The next contact date is a key concept that we use. Every time that a contact is made with a customer, a next contact, a follow-up date is set automatically, and it can be changed, and we'll get to that when we get into the contact event screen. But this then gets resorted so that the newest date is at the bottom. So every time they follow up on the oldest one, then there'll be a new next contact date, and it will go to the bottom, so that this is always bubbling up to the top as a contact event screen. So here we have write-offs, here we have amounts. Maybe every one of these is resortable. Maybe you want to resort this based on due date, ascending or descending. So you can take a look at the oldest or the newest. You can take a look at, and we'll do this again, amounts. Maybe you want to look at the biggest amount. Maybe you want to sort this because today is your day to work with disputes. Now, when we mark something in dispute, and in fact, we'll do that right now. Okay, so there are 3 places where you can mark an invoice in dispute. This screen is one of them. You put your cursor on the line and you say mark as disputed. Once the dispute is resolved, you say dispute resolved, and the check mark moves from the invoice in dispute to dispute resolved where it resides in history. The second place is in the exception manager, which we'll get to in just a second. But the third place is on the posted sales invoice itself. So if we go over to posted sales invoices, let's say that an invoice was sent to the customer yesterday. They open it up this morning and they look at it and they say, this invoice is wrong and I'm not going to pay it until they fix it. Now, the first thing that most people do when they call up, whether it's a collections rep or whether it's a customer service person, is they will open up the posted sales invoice so that they can view what the customer's issue is. We've added in a function on the posted sales invoice that says send to exception list as disputed. If you click on this, one of two things is going to, well, two things are going to happen, and one's an option. So if the person, first of all, this will be sent over to the exception list immediately, and it will be flagged as in dispute. And it will mark on the exception list who it was that clicked on this, the send to the exception list as disputed, so that somebody can follow up and say to know who took the call. If the person who takes the call is a collections rep, when they click on send to exception list as disputed, it automatically opens up the contact event screen so they can document what the problem is. If the person that takes the call is a customer service rep and not a collections rep, then it will open up the comment screen where they can also document it, but it's not inside the collection system because they don't have access to confidential information. So that's disputes. All right, so now we go back to the exception list, and well, let's get over to here. We go to the exception list, and we've decided we're going to contact the School of Fine Art because there's a whole bunch of things here. So we go to the exception manager. And the exception manager shows all of the open invoices that need to be collected. This is the third place where you can mark things in dispute. If you go into, you can mark it as disputed here also. They keep moving this stuff around. Well, let's see. Mark as disputed. Right there. Mark is disputed. Okay, down here there's an aging. So all of the we've had requests to age this out to 150 days or more. So these are all drillable. This will show them open orders if they want to see what's on order but has not been shipped. There is a lot of information on this screen. If you click on related, we can go into the contact event history, which we'll do that in just a second. You can click on the customer, and there's all kinds of information under here, which is information only. Mark is disputed, jump to the posted sales invoice, reprint it. There's a whole bunch of different possible things you can look up. Maybe you want to look up under the history. You can jump to the customer card, jump to the ledger entries. If you want, you can use the aging report. All of this is available from this screen. But the next thing that most people do is they go to the contact event history. If there have been previous contacts with the customer, you can open this up and you can see who contacted whom and when and what happened. So in this case, we contacted Megan. What we did was we did a call. You can set up, they will set up their own list of what various different actions they have. And Megan promised to pay this invoice. Now, this is a short summary comment. You can enter a long comment by clicking on the ellipsis, and here you can write a book. So I see here that I didn't capitalize Megan, so I can go in and I can edit this. If I look at this and say, I forgot to write something, you can amend the comment. Now, these two comments, this comment, the short comment and the long comment, and the date of the contact is in a report. So we offer you the user a report that reviews all of the contacts for all of the different customers by collections rep, and they can opt to either see the long comment, which is under here, or the short comment, and there are reasons for doing both. The other information that's added in here is what invoice did they call about, how much did they promise to send to pay, when did they promise to pay it. So we also offer a report that details projected cash flow based on collections activity. So based on this part of the contact event, we will show you what promises have been made and how much money that based on collections effort. This is not an overall cash flow projection, but rather just related to collections activity. So those are the three parts: the contact event history, the exception manager to research what's going on, and the exception list, which is the to-do list. Now, we've had several people who have said they really don't want to, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines in the exception list, particularly for new users, where they have years of cleanup to do. And that's really what the screen helps you clean up old issues. We had several people say they really didn't want to go into this exception list. They know who they want to contact, so what they want to do is be able to go to a specified customer, and they know that they want to contact the School of Fine Art. This is the one that they want to contact, and we'll talk about this little gem in a minute. And so what we've done is under process, we give them the ability from the customer card to jump right to the exception manager for this customer, or if they've already gotten in touch with the customer, they can jump right to going to the comments, the accounts receivable comments. So they can shortcut and not use the exception list if they don't want to. They can do it right from the customer card. Let's talk about orders on hold. We recently added new functionality to the AR and Collections Manager that allows people to enable credit hold. And credit hold is what is the ability to stop things from being released to shipping if the customer's open balance exceeds their credit limit. That is, their open balance plus unshipped orders exceeds their credit limit. Then the customer can automatically be put on credit hold, and it will prevent them from being able to release orders for shipping. This can be overridden by specified people if they want to. Now, I mentioned before I was going to talk about this little gem. This is supposed to be next to credit hold. Over right here, there appears to be a bug, a known bug in Microsoft. In fact, if you Google, let's see, it's in web browsers, Edge and Chrome. This doesn't happen if you're using Firefox, but apparently some of these little functions become unglued, and it is a known issue that Microsoft has to deal with in version 20.2. Other versions, not a problem, but this happens to be the latest version in the App Store, and it's a problem. So there we see that we've set the credit limit to 50,000. They're over their credit limit is 50,000. They're over their credit limit, and so now what we have is the ability to see all of the orders that have been on hold. I think that that it's interfering with the functionality, because we have a report uh, uh, under Actions, Orders on Hold, which is supposed to populate all of the orders that are on hold if they, Microsoft helping me, orders on hold. And there are two places where you can see orders on hold. One is on the customer card, and the other is here, orders on hold, and this will show all orders on hold for all customers. That may be the collections person's first job in the morning, is to open up and see what's on hold and deal with those customers first. So that's kind of the short version, and we're already an hour into this, so that gives you a flavor of what we're doing. We have a couple planned improvements. It turns out that Great Plains, we have one customer who came from Great Plains to Business Central, and Great Plains had a very good summary screen for customers, showing shortcuts to the comments, shortcuts to the overdue invoices, shortcuts to a lot of information, terms, and so forth. And that is going to be added in as a shortcut on the customer card as soon as we can format it. Shouldn't be too difficult, because all we're doing is collecting information that's available in other places. So those two things are planned, is to add the function on credit hold to recognize number of days late as a trigger for putting a customer on credit hold. Okay, so before we go on, let's see if we can, if there are any questions on oh, nope, I guess we go on through Dimension Manager first, and then we'll go back to questions at the end. So the other add-on that I wanted to talk about today was Dimension Manager. Now, Business Central, I'm told, has some functionality to be able to change dimensions on posted records, although I haven't been able to find it. Before this meeting, I went through on a posted sales invoice and looked for a place where Business Central allows you to change the dimensions, and I couldn't find it. I've been told it's there, and I believe it's there. I didn't see it. However, there are a whole bunch of things that Business Central does not do for changing dimensions. So one of the main things is it does not store an audit trail of who changed what and when. If you have a larger customer who's subject to Sarbanes-Oxley, audit trails are mandatory when you change posted data. And this is what Dimension Manager does, is it allows you to add, modify, or delete a dimension value on any posted record. And there is no audit trail of who changed it. Now, I've had people say that they can use the change log, but if you take a look at what gets changed when you change dimensions, there would be hundreds of thousands of entries created in the change log, because you'd have to activate all of the subledgers and all of the other things that potentially got changed when you change the dimensions on a posted document. So we store an audit trail. We have a history. And in that history, it offers you the ability to reverse the entry. What if the dimensions were changed in error and somebody comes down and says, no, you changed the wrong one, you changed it to the wrong value, then you can go in and you can reverse it, and it will put it back the way it was. More importantly, though, and this is really important for Business Central users, we offer the ability to batch change lists of records. So let's say that you have a new Business Central user and they really haven't gotten the idea of dimensions. Dimensions are a tremendously powerful tool. And sometimes it takes a while for the people in the organization to catch on just exactly how powerful it is and what you can do with it. Until the vice president of sales, after 6 months using Business Central, comes down and says, we can track this information. Well, I want to track the ability to segregate reporting on sales in North America as from sales in Europe, or large accounts from small accounts, or any number of different things that might want to be tracked. For payroll purposes, we have lots of people who use dimensions for employees, so that they will they can sort all of the postings, payroll postings and records for individual employees. So that's free, and we'll talk about that maybe at another time. But that's a common usage. The problem becomes, after 6 months, they have a whole lot of history. And they say, okay, that's great. We can create these new dimensions and track the changes for the sales for Europe versus North America. How can we apply this dimension against all of our posted data? And the answer is, you can, in Business Central 20, and I think 19, you can do it one transaction at a time. Well, who wants to do that? And if you're older than Business Central 19, you can't change it at all. So anybody that is not on the latest versions of Business Central does not have this functionality, and certainly not in NAV, which is where we originally developed this. But we can set up a filtered list of transactions and batch change them. So what we'll do is we'll navigate on a transaction, and we'll see where it was, what all the subledgers were that were created when it was originally posted, and we will update anything that's in what used to be called the navigate screen. It's now called additional entries, and we'll update all of it. Let's say that you want to update all of the entries for a particular customer. You changed the salespeople, and they forgot to change the salesperson dimension, and effective 3 months ago, all of the salesperson dimension for all of the transactions for a customer are now wrong. So you can go into the customer ledger entry screen, set a filter on a date range, and update the dimensions for salesperson at the click of a button. We can change dimensions on individual posted document lines, and we have a lot of people that ask for the ability to update individual line level dimensions. That is, the dimensions associated with items. There's a limitation on what you can do with that, and the limitation, and people need to understand this limitation. The way Business Central and NAV works is that, at least out of the box, and there's an override function which we can talk about in a second. When they post an invoice with multiple lines, if all the lines on the invoice have the same dimensions, then when Business Central and Microsoft posts it, they create a single GL entry for all of the lines. Now, if that's the case, then we can't change the lines, because we do not create additional GL entry lines, okay? If, however, the individual lines were posted individually, and that might happen because the individual lines started off having different dimensions or different posting groups, either one will cause lines to be posted individually. Also in Business Central, there is a setup function in sales and receivables, and this is only in the last 3 versions of Business Central, I believe, that you can enable a function that always posts lines individually. And if that's the case, then you can change dimensions on individual lines anytime you want. As long as the individual line items on a posted document have a separate entry in the general ledger, then we can change it. However, if they're posted in summary, you can't. So we can also set the desired. This was requested by 2 different customers about a week apart. What they said was, we made a mistake when we set up this customer and we assigned the dimensions that we want to use, or we have a new one. So they open up the customer card and they say, these are the dimensions that should be used for this customer. And you can push a button and it will push that dimension set to all posted records for that customer and all open records so that they don't have to go back and do it later. Anything that gets created new will automatically have the new dimension set assigned to it. So this is a convenience when people change their minds or they decide that there's additional dimensions that they want this customer to have. This is a last one is a really, really important one, particularly for customers who post their financials. Almost always, financial reporting is based on dimensions. Almost always. The problem becomes that in Business Central, if you allow dimensions to be changed indiscriminately, it can change the financial reporting. If the customer happens to be a public company and they have published their 10K or 10Q reporting to the SEC, the SEC takes a dim view of changing your financials after you've reported them. So we've added in the function that will restrict a user's ability to make changes based on the posting date range in the user setup. This is something that can be enabled in dimension management setup so that it will prevent, it'll give you a permissions error. It says you don't have permission to change the dimensions for a document with a posting date outside of their date range. Now, a supervisor can go in and can override that. And there's 2 ways to be able to do it, because theoretically they know what they can change and what they can't change if it's a CFO or a controller. They can either disable this restriction, or as they do normally today, for certain users, they simply expand the posting date range to include the previous period in order to be able to do month closes. So either one will work, but if this is enabled, they will get a permissions error if they try to change dimensions on a document that is outside of their posting date range. This is probably one of the most important reasons to get Dimension Manager, that and batch changing functions, and the audit trail and the undo function. So let's take a look at Dimension Manager. We'll go back to our database and we'll take a look at, let's go to sales and posted sales invoices. Oh, we'll pick one. Doesn't matter which one. So we'll take a look at the Alpine Ski House, this invoice. Now, first thing we want to do is see what the dimensions are for this document. So if we go to actions and we say find entries, which is the old navigate function in nav, we find entries. And we see that when this document was originally posted, it was created once as a sales invoice. 11 lines in the GL entry table were created. And remember, if they were posted in summary, well, in this case, there's only 1 line. But if there were multiple lines and they were posted in summary, we would not be able to change this VLDM, Vertical Leap Dimension Manager, is where you would change line level dimensions. It was there were 3 tax entries, customer ledger entry, 2 lines. So all of these entries were created when the document was posted. So what we can do is we can go to VLDM, change dimensions. Well, let's see what the dimensions were to start with. Let's go back and invoice, and we want to take a look at the dimensions. So these are the dimensions that are associated with this posted sales invoice. So now, if we want to add in another one that was not included here, we can. If we want to remove one, we can. If we want to change salesperson or department or whatever, we can do that also. So let's change the department code. This is one of the global dimensions. We can change all the global dimensions as well as the extended dimensions. Let's take a look at department. And so we go back to actions and we go to find entries. And so now we go to VLDM, change dimension. So we said we're going to change the department. We select the department and we see that currently it was put, the dimension that's associated with this document is sales. So we're going to change that. For whatever stupid reason, we're going to make it production. So we click OK and it's done. And if we open up the GL entries and we take a look at the GL entries, we will see that department code is now production rather than sales. Okay, and every one of these tables, if there were dimensions associated with them, oh, this is something else. Let's talk about this. Let's go back to here. In recent versions of Business Central, I think from BC 16 on, Microsoft has included the shortcut dimensions on the GL entry table. Prior to that, and also in NAV, only the global dimensions were visible in the GL entry table. If you get Dimension Manager for any of these older versions, either any version in NAV or versions of Business Central before Microsoft added the shortcut dimensions, we add the shortcut dimensions for you so that they can see all of the dimensions associated with it. Now, if you're really an aficionado, you'll know that not only are there 2 global dimensions and 6 shortcut dimensions, but people can go to extended dimensions. And I've run into customers who are using 12, 13, and 14 different dimensions. We will change all of them. Now, they won't show up in the customer ledger entry table, but if you have a dimension, whether it's a global dimension, a shortcut dimension, or an extended dimension, we give you access to be able to change any of them. So now we see that it's now production. Now, people are happy if we go back to, let's go back to here and we go to invoice and we open up the document and we see that in fact, let's see, we have the department code is prod. Somebody comes down and says, what were you thinking? We don't have invoices with dimensions for production. We want it back to sales. So there's a couple ways to do this, but if we go to actions and we say find entries, there is another function under actions. Change dimension is one, dimension management history is the other. And if we open it up, we will see a record of who changed what, when they changed it, what it was before they changed it, and what they changed it to, and what all got changed. So this is a list of all of the individual entries that were changed. This will satisfy Sarbanes-Oxley. This is a complete audit trail of what got changed, who changed it, and when they changed it. And if they want to, they can say undo dimension change, and it will put it back the way it was. So now, if we go into the ledger entries, it's back to sales. And if we go all the way back into the document, and we go into invoice and go to dimensions, it's now back to sales. Now, this is fine for doing one document at a time. However, you could set a filter on any filter you want, and then you can go to actions and VLDM batch navigate change dimensions. So navigate is this function about examining all of the related entries. So, and we're going to set a batch. Anything within the batch filter will be updated. You can set it based on a posting date. You can set it based on a customer. You can set it based on any filter you want, and then go and batch navigate, change dimensions, and it will change all of them. So the same thing, do you want to change the dimensions? It says what dimension do you want to change? It'll show you what it was and what you change it to if you want. You can also go to customer ledger entries. So if we open up, for example, School of Fine Arts, because there's a bunch of entries there, and we go into the ledger entries, you can go in here and you can say, I want to update the dimensions based on a date range. So you remember we talked about salesperson code. You can say for the last 6 months or 3 months or 1 month, update all entries in the customer ledger entry table based on the posting date range. Now, in fact, you may want to do more than one customer at a time. You can go in here and we can go in here and go to Actions, VLDM, and you can update batch change. We'll talk about these two in a second. Batch change dimensions for all of your customers or whatever customers are within the filter. You can set a filter on your customer list. And you can say, I want to update all of the customer ledger entries for a date range for the specific customers. Now, remember back. Let's take a look at dimension management setup. Dimension management setup. This is the setup screen, and it's really, really simple to set up. The one thing that you might want to do is enable posting date check. That's that function that says if you try to change a document's dimensions that's outside of your posting date range, then you will get an error if this is enabled. Now that implies that the user who's making the changes must be entered in the user setup table. And in fact, I get inquiries about an error message that says customer user does not exist in setup. And that is referring to the fact that if they're going to use this, they have to be in the setup table. They don't have to have a date range, but they have to at least be in the setup table. The other function is allow batch changes, and that's what we just saw in the customer list, is being able to specify what the dimensions should be for a customer and then push it to all posted entries and all open entries. Now, at some point, and this is true of all of our add-ons, always in the setup screen, you'll see what the version is of the add-on. This is on every single add-on that we have, and also a subscription ID. And anytime you have a customer that uses our add-ons, and you need us to adjust the trial, the length of the trial period, or fix something associated with the subscription payments, I will always need the subscription ID in order to be able to find the entries. One final thing, and then we're going to open it up for questions, and that is the dimension management history. There we go. That's what I want. The history list. This is a list of all of the changes that were made, and you can find the entry and open it up. So these are the ones that we just did. We changed the, let's go by, this is the one that we just did. First, we changed the dimension management, the dimension, and then we undid it. So if we open this up, we can open up this entry and manage, view the entry. This is the entry. This is the undo entry. okay? This is where we'll put it from production back to sales. We can undo that. So undo change reverses these two. So whatever the new value is will be reversed to what the old value was, and it doesn't matter where in this list that is. It'll always do that. So you have to be a little careful with this, but this is a complete list of all of the changes and who made them. So that's dimension management. It's much more complete, and it's not very expensive, and it just provides a huge additional set of functions. Some of them are really, really important to users, and they don't realize that although Business Central allows them to do it, although I haven't found where, it's hidden well, and I searched on dimension changes, there's an awful lot of danger associated with using it, and I suspect that there are some software laws in Europe that require an audit trail. And I doubt very much that anybody in Europe will use the dimension change function. In fact, they may require European versions to not offer it because it does not conform to European software standards.